Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing a Reapercast episode, so I hope you guys have actually missed it. It's been quite a while since I last did a Reapercast episode, but that's because there wasn't really much news to actually talk about. Today we actually have an entire new archetype to actually talk about here, so without further ado, let's just dive on in because there are a lot of cards to actually go over. Now these are essentially a new archetype that's focused on pendulums, and that's definitely very interesting because Konami hasn't been giving a lot of love to pendulum decks, so seeing this is definitely fantastic. It's also meant to be kind of like that Valentine's gift. Do Re Mi is obviously a musical, we could clearly see that this is focused on music, which is definitely interesting. Honestly, I feel like this could have been Melodious, because Melodious was kind of also based off music, and it was also part of the pendulum era, but hey, I guess we just have a completely different archetype now. However, with that being said, the first card here is Do Re Mi called Coolia, Wind Fairy Pendulum Effect Monster. Let's see here, so it's the scale 1 and it's level 8, 2700 attack and 2500 defense. So pendulum effect, when you pendulum summon a Do Re Mi called monster, or pendulum monster that is, your opponent cannot activate monster effects or spell trap cards. Definitely very nice, kind of gives you that extra protection right off the bat. However, for the monster effects, the second and third effects can only be used once per turn. So first effect, you could special summon this card from your hand by tributing 2 pendulum monsters. Very easy to summon out, so that's quite nice. Second effect, you could target one face-up card your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of your opponent's turn. If you have an odd number pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, you could target 2 cards instead. Third effect, when the effect of a monster on the field with attack less than or equal to 300 times the pendulum scale in your pendulum zone is activated, as a quick effect, you can destroy that monster. Alright, so not bad so far. I actually kind of like it. All these effects seem to be quite nice, and if the other cards actually synergize with this, then I have no complaints whatsoever. It could be something I might be interested in building. Moving on here, we have Do Re Mi called Cutia, level 1 Earth Fairy Pendulum Effect Monster, 100 attack, 400 defense, scale 8. Pendulum effect, your Do Re Mi called Pendulum Monsters, Pendulum Summon cannot be negated. Fantastic, because that means all the warnings and the judgments, or anything that will just negate, absolutely fantastic, because we all know that Solemn Strike can easily just deal with a pendulum summon, so seeing an effect like this is definitely well needed in a pendulum deck. Monster effects, you have 2 different ones here, so if this card is summoned, you can add a Do Re Mi called Pendulum Monster from your deck to your hand except itself. Second effect, if you have an even number pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, Do Re Mi called Pendulum Monsters you control gain 100 attack times their own pendulum scale. So they are focusing on a bit of a buff, but at the same time they all have their own unique effects. In this case, this one's the Searcher, so I could see myself playing 3 of them. Next here we have Do Re Mi called Dreamia, very nice naming of course. Level 2 Wind Fairy Pendulum Effect Monster, 600 attack, 400 defense, scale 7. Pendulum effect, your Do Re Mi called Pendulum Monsters, Pendulum Summon cannot be negated, again very amazing. 2 monster effects, if there is a Do Re Mi called card in your pendulum zone, you could special summon this card from your hand. Wow, it's just really easy to summon out. And second effect, if you have an odd number pendulum scale monster in your pendulum zone, and a Do Re Mi called pendulum monster card you control would be destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can destroy this card instead of one of that card. Not particularly the greatest, but the fact that it also protects your pendulum summons is definitely quite nice, and either way, it's a free summon, so you could probably go for your link climbing and that would be quite nice. Moving on, we have Midori Mi called Elitia, level 3 Water Fairy Pendulum Effect Monster, 1100 attack, 400 defense, scale 6, pendulum effect. Your summons again can't be negated, so that's great. As for the 2 monster effects, if this card is summoned, you can target 1 spell trap your opponent controls and bounce it back. Not particularly amazing, but the next effect is, if you have an even number pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, then you take no battle damage from battles involving Do Re Mi called pendulum monsters you control. So this one's clearly not the best one out of all of them, but either way I guess it just adds as a scale monster, so that's something that might add on some kind of importance. At best, I kind of see myself playing only 1 copy of this. Moving on, we have Do Re Mi called Fancia, very interesting, level 4-5 Fairy Pendulum Effect Monster, 1600 attack, 400 defense, scale 5. Again, your pendulum effect is your pendulum summons can't be negated for your Do Re Mi called Pendulum Monsters. As for the monster effects, during your main phase you could take one Doremi called Pendulum Monster from your deck, accept itself and place it face up in the extra deck, which kind of prepares yourself for a Pendulum Summon. Second effect, if an odd number Pendulum Scale monster is in your Pendulum Zone and a Doremi called Pendulum Monster you control would be destroyed by battle, you can destroy this card instead. Very nice, allowing it to kind of fill in itself to the extra deck so that you can just Pendulum Summon it later on. Next we have So Doremi called Gracia, level 5 Water Fairy Pendulum Effect monster, 2100 attack, 1400 defense, scale 4 pendulum effects. When you pendulum summon a Doremi called Pendulum monster, your opponent cannot activate monster effects or spells and traps. Again, very interesting, similar to the first one of course. Monster effects, if this card is summoned, you could add a Doremi called Spell Trap from your deck to your hand, very nice. And second effect, if you have an even number and your Doremi called Pendulum Monster attacks, your opponent cannot activate monster effects until the end of the damage step. Definitely very nice, very interesting. I would say this card's a little better than the previous two, but even so, it's not the greatest among them. It's still a great searcher though, so that's something I'll give a bonus for. Now let me just say that at this point the artwork is absolutely amazing. I'm actually really digging this particular artwork, so just on artwork alone I would actually build the deck, but to be honest the effects are actually very nice and they synergize incredibly well. Next we have La Doremi called Angelia, level 6 Fire Fairy Pendulum Effect monster, 2300 attack, 1400 defense, scale 3 pendulum effect. When you pendulum summon a Doremi called Pendulum monster, your opponent cannot activate monster effects or spell trap cards. Monster effect, during your main phase you contribute one Doremi called Pendulum Monster. If you do, special summon one Doremi called Pendulum Monster with a pendulum scale that is 2 higher or lower than the tributed monsters from the deck, except itself. And second effect, if you have an odd number pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, then your Doremi called Pendulum Monster attacks, your opponent cannot activate spells and traps until the end of the damage step. I kind of actually saw that coming, but still very nice card. 2300 attack is kind of going to act as that nice beat stick for your deck. Moving on, we have C Doremi called Beautia. This is absolutely beautiful. I actually love the artwork for this one the most. But it's a level 7 Earth Fairy Pendulum Effect monster, 2500 attack and 2400 defense, scale 2. Pendulum effect is basically if you have a Doremi called Pendulum Monster, then your opponent can't activate the monster or spell traps, so that's again the same effect as before. As for the monster effects, firstly, as the quick effect, you could target one effect monster your opponent controls during this turn. If that card would leave the field, banish it. If you have an even number pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, then you could target one face-up spell trap your opponent controls instead. So again, quite nice. Second effect, once per turn at the start of the damage step, when this card battles a monster with an attack that is equal to or higher than the lowest pendulum scale in your pendulum zone times 300, you can destroy that monster. Not too bad, it is kind of like that interesting subpar boss monster, so yeah, it's quite nice. Now moving on, we have some spell support. We have Doremi called Scale, a normal spell card, and you can only activate one card with this card's name per turn. Apply these effects in sequence according to the number of Doremi called Pendulum cards you control with different names. So if you have 3 or more, then return one card from your pendulum zone to the hand, and if you do, place one Doremi called Pendulum Monster from your extra deck to your pendulum zone. Of course, that's pretty easy because instantly, if you're playing this pendulum deck, you're most likely going to have 2 cards in the pendulum zone anyway, so it's quite easy to actually meet these conditions. So if you have 5 or more, you could special summon one Doremi called Pendulum Monster from your hand. And if you have 7 or more, then you could destroy all face-up cards your opponent controls. That is going to be quite ideal, and that would be quite nice. It's definitely quite powerful, and if I pull that off, I would actually be quite happy. Next, we have a field spell. Select and activate one of these effects. You can only select these effects of Harmonia once per turn each. So you could either add one Doremi called Pendulum Monster from your face-up extra deck to your hand, or you could have one Doremi called card in your pendulum zone gain pendulum scales equal to its level until the end of this turn. Or, if you control 3 or more Doremi called Pendulum Monster cards with different names that have an odd number pendulum scales, or that have an even number pendulum scales, you can destroy one card your opponent controls. So pretty interesting. I mean, it is a field spell after all, but to have these 3 effects and be viable, it is definitely quite nice. Not amazing, but definitely still a good addition for the deck. And of course, for the trap cards, we have Do Re Mi Quod Musica. It's a normal trap, and you can only activate one card with this card's name per turn. Select one of these effects to activate based on the pendulum scale of Do Re Mi Quod Pendulum monster cards you control. If you have an odd number, then you could special summon one Do Re Mi Quod Pendulum monster with an odd number pendulum scale from your face-up extra deck. Likewise, the same thing can be done for an even number. And finally, if it's both an odd and even number, then you could target one card your opponent controls and destroy it. Personally, I kind of like this special summoning effects to kind of extend our plays, but the last effect is okay as well if it really applies. And finally, we have Do Re Mi Quod Formal counter trap card. You can only activate one card with this card's name per turn. When your opponent activates a monster effect or a spell trap card and you control a Do Re Mi Quod card in your pendulum zone, shuffle one pendulum monster from your face-up extra deck into your deck. Then apply one of these effects. Pendulum monsters you control are unaffected by that opponent's effect, or cards in your pendulum zones cannot be destroyed by an opponent's effect, or cards in your pendulum zones cannot be banished by that opponent's card effect. So definitely a great card to help respond to different situations, and that is absolutely wonderful. And finally, we're also getting here a reprint of Wavering Eyes, which is definitely going to be necessary for this particular deck. You know, I've kind of fallen out of love for pendulum decks, and to see that we're actually getting a deck like this, it's kind of regained that love again for pendulums, because I was kind of starting to get rid of all my pendulum decks. I did actually get rid of quite a few, so once Project E comes, you guys will actually know which decks I got rid of. But I never actually had too many pendulum decks to begin with anyway, so to actually have this as a deck would actually be quite fun, so I am very much so looking forward to this. Of course, this is going to be a waifu deck, which is definitely going to be quite a pain because of the fact that, well, if my opponent or if anybody wants to actually build a deck, I'm pretty sure this is going to be one of the most expensive decks. It doesn't even have to be a good deck. If it's a waifu deck, everyone's going to want to build it, and that's going to be a pain to actually get all these cards. However, with that being said, definitely leave me your thoughts on what you actually think about this. Do you have a particular favorite among these cards? If you enjoyed this video, definitely drop a like and share it, it really helps. And also subscribe for more videos just like this. However, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you all next time.